I once visited an ancient fortress in Elvas, Portugal, one of the world's finest examples of a post-gunpowder star fort in the Italian Trace Italian style. Looking up, I saw a bird's nest nestled in the muzzle of an old cannon, and it struck me as incredibly ironic. Your safe haven suddenly becomes the mouth of a raging weapon. That image is burned into my brain, vivid and unsettling. My name is Wolfgang Brown. When these events unfolded, I was a 42-year-old contract technical consultant running a comfortably successful home-based business. My wife, Molly, 44, was a paralegal at her brother's law firm, a short drive from our home in semi-rural Prather County, Texas. We have twin 20-year-old sons, Ethan and Brian, nicknamed Thane and Bill, attending my alma mater a couple of hours away. Unlike most of these stories, I'm not a Navy SEAL, and Molly's not some supermodel who miraculously maintains her figure after having kids. I stay reasonably fit by running a mile a day and eating well, but mostly good genes have kept me in decent shape. At the time, I was 6'1", 188 pounds, with a touch of salt and pepper in my dark brown hair. Molly is 5, around 150 pounds, about 20 pounds heavier than when we married, mostly in a lovely, curvy way, with a generous 36C bust. While Molly's a bit curvy, I loved her sensual curves as much as she hated them. Her raven black hair was free of gray, almost shimmering blue in the sunlight. Her dark brown eyes were sharp and intense, capable of cutting through me like a hot knife through butter, both in happy times and when I was in trouble with her. Even after 21 years of marriage, our sex life was pretty good, though it had dwindled to once or twice a week, for about a month before things went haywire. I finished my engineering degree 2 semesters behind schedule, so we lived with my parents in the house where Molly and I eventually raised our kids. In fact, we moved in, had the twins, and never left. My parents renovated the house, originally built in 1935, after inheriting it from my mother's uncle Bill. After graduation, I got a job with a local manufacturing company. The 6 of us lived comfortably until Dad, also an engineer, was snatched up by a headhunter and moved to Pittsburgh. Mom, the real homeowner, rented it to us for $1 a year, provided we covered all taxes, insurance, and maintenance. That unexpected windfall, along with my good salary, allowed Molly to become a stay-at-home mom. By the time the twins were in the 3rd grade, Molly's brother, Kevin, hired her part-time at his law firm. We agreed she'd become a paralegal, and I happily sacrificed to help her get certified. After all, I reasoned, Molly had dropped out of college to help me finish engineering school and raise our young children. That's when I branched out on my own and started my successful home-based consulting business. Life was idyllic. Many evenings we sat on the long, covered porch of that old house, planning for the future. It was there, on those quiet evenings, that we forged our hopes, dreams, and goals, hammering them into reality on the rough and anvil of love, trust, and understanding. Molly and I jointly maintained a vegetable garden, planted flowers, and loved to cook. We also kept working on that old house, mostly routine and preventative maintenance. We had so much in common that feeling safe and comfortable came naturally. When the kids were around 12, the natural gas company ran a pipeline along the county road, and we hooked into it, eliminating our giant propane tank and the higher LP gas costs from our budget. Most of the expense was tapping into the main supply line, laying the service line to our house, and making the connection for use. I had a plumber inspect the house's original piping. It was still good, but Molly wanted an additional hot water heater. So, we upgraded the older unit, located in the basement, and added a newer one in the attic. Part of that upgrade was a new gas supply line running from the house's meter to the hot water heater at the far end of the basement. It ran through the ceiling joists and dropped down to the hot water heater connected by a ball valve and flexible hose. Life on the rural fringe was good, and life unfolded in a comfortable, predictable stream. There were ups and downs, minor misunderstandings, and all the other conflicts any marriage experiences. We always tried to talk things out, and we had a wonderful, supportive family network to lean on when we needed to. Above all, we had the perfect glue holding it all together: love. Life changes. Molly started changing in the late fall and winter after the twins left for college. She became more withdrawn, secretive, and when I asked, she dismissively blamed the kids' absence. Since I worked from home, their absence seemed to affect me more. Because Molly was back at work, I had handled their morning and after-school needs. When I had to travel for work, Molly adjusted her schedule or called on a family member or neighbor for help. In any case, I wasn't going to engage in a pissing contest about who missed the kids more, but I seemed to handle it better. As the bleak, dreary winter days wore on, Molly became more distant and even angry. She started finding fault with little things, and it seemed like anything could set her off. There was no reason or rationale for her outbursts. After one particularly nasty argument, I angrily confronted her, and Molly stormed out of the house, returning after midnight. Following that incident, I asked Kevin, her brother and boss, to talk to her. He and their mother, Betty, staged an intervention at the end of the workday, resulting in Molly telling them to stay out of her life and, shockingly, quitting her job. The days that followed were awful in the Brown household. Betty tried to get my wife to see her OB/GYN or family doctor, suspecting hormonal issues. That seemed to anger Molly even more, and then all of us were in her crosshairs. In Molly's mind, life was awful, she was bored, and her family except for Thane and Bill were part of her problem. Christmas and New Year's passed in tension, and both kids were as confused as the rest of us, but they tried to remain neutral. When alone with their mother, either or both, Thane and Bill said she was still tense, but Molly was the mother they always knew in every other way. Bill tried to talk to his mother about the atmosphere between her and me, and Molly told her mother it wasn't her business. Right after Christmas, Molly left the house one morning in her business clothes, and when I asked where she was going, she just looked at me and said, "Out." Bill followed her to the garage and asked his mother what she was doing, but only got the response, "I'm doing something for myself." After that day, I learned from Bill that his mother had gone for a job interview at another law firm, and they hired her on the spot as a paralegal and personal assistant to one of the partners. When I asked her, she just nodded and said, "Now, I'm not working somewhere just because I'm family." "Molly, I didn't think Kevin hired you for that reason." "You're good at your job, honey," I said softly. To my surprise, she gave me a warm kiss on the lips. "Thank you, Wolfgang." It was the first kiss since after Christmas. "Oh, we're invited to the law firm's New Year's Eve party. For me, it will be like a meet and greet." I didn't mention her family's New Year's Eve party, a yearly tradition of ours. Instead, I decided to just go along and see where things went. After all, I reasoned, this was the most civil Molly and I had been since she unilaterally declared a Christmas truce. When we showed up at the small banquet room for the Baker, Mike, and Bradford Law Firm's New Year's Eve party, the office manager, a woman named Peggy Leeson, introduced Molly and me to the attendees. It was a boilerplate affair, with a rented venue, catering, open bar, and a decent DJ. At dinner, we sat with 3 other couples and I immediately noticed that everyone was drinking heavily. As New Year's Eve parties go, this one was fairly typical. Molly seemed like herself, and we mingled fairly well with the other couples and a few singles. I met all 3 partners and they seemed like fairly decent guys. There was no untoward behavior on the part of anyone that I could detect, so this party was nothing in the overall scheme of future events. For me, it was just putting names and faces together, ones I would soon see under entirely different circumstances. Unlike Molly's 2-day Christmas break, this period of family peace lasted only until I shifted the car into drive leaving the party venue. I put my hand on my lovely wife's leg and she roughly pushed it away. "Maybe if you hadn't hovered over me all night, I might be in the mood." "Damn it, you're like my chaperone, Wolfgang." "I don't know any of these people. What do you expect me to do?" I asked. With a stern look, she replied, "I don't know either. You're a grown man. Maybe you should have attended the family party and let me meet these people on my own." "Really, honey? Attend a family New Year's Eve party without you?" She shrugged and sadly looked out the window, signaling the end of the conversation. Despite starting her new job on the 2nd, Molly remained sullen and erratic. For the first few days she never realized dinner was ready when she came home, and Thane finally woke her up. Bill attempted to get Molly to see a doctor about her mood and was rebuffed as badly as anyone else. Kevin told me that Betty had lunch with Molly the following Friday, and their mother left in tears. To indicate how bad things were in the Brown household, by early January, Thane and Bill drove back to school 3 days early. Late in January, I was doing my routine check of the basement hot water heater, the central heating unit, and generally poking around, checking for water leaks and inspecting plumbing and wiring. I saw a light from the kitchen doorway and noticed Molly standing at the top of the basement stairs, arms crossed, a stern look on her face. She clearly intended to launch into one of the frequent angry confrontations we've been having for the past few months. "Wolfgang, we need to talk," she snapped. Before I could respond, she turned and headed toward the family room. As I followed, Molly sat in one of the large, comfortable armchairs opposite the L-shaped sofa and love seat. "Sit down. I have something to tell you," she said coldly. She was still in her business attire. Part of me was apprehensive. There was something different in her eyes. Another part braced itself for some endless stream of complaints and anger. No part of me was prepared for the steaming pile of manure that was about to rain down from the stratosphere into my margarita glass. "Honey, I don't know any other way to say this, but I'm bored with my current life. I'm unfulfilled and unhappy. Life's monotonous, and the world's passing me by. There's no passion, no excitement. And you, Wolfgang, are a significant part of how I feel." "What? Honey, Shut up, Wolfgang. I need to tell you this, damn it," she yelled. "See? You won't even let me tell you how I feel." As I said, I'm bored with my life, so I'm making some bigger changes. I've connected with my new boss, and we've been seeing each other for about 2 weeks now. There's a spark between us, and we can't hide it anymore. Gunn will pick me up here in an hour for a date, and I may not be home until tomorrow, or even Sunday. Anger exploded. "What? Damn it, you will?" I shouted. "What makes you think I'll put up with this? Have you lost your mind, Molly?" "Wolfgang, be rational. I haven't been happy for months. Maybe it's just adjustment issues without the kids, but I need this to stay sane. Let me get this off my chest. I love you, honey, and I want to spend my life with you. This with Gunn is purely physical, sweetie." "Damn it, Molly. Why do you think I'll agree to this? Have you forgotten our wedding vows?" She looked at me like I was insane. "I love you, Molly, and I won't tolerate your infidelity." Molly laughed. "Oh, Wolfgang, that's your ego talking. Honey, I love you, but right now I need a change of pace. It's just sex, and it means nothing to me except having some fun before I'm too old to enjoy it." I abruptly stood, and Molly said, "Stop. Don't take another step closer to me." "What?" I asked, bewildered. "I'm freaking out here, Molly. I mean, what do you want me to do? Agree to let you have sex with someone else? Because that's not going to happen." "Wolfgang, I'm serious. I don't like the way you're standing there. Back off," she hissed. Confused by her behavior, I moved and sat on the stairs. "Look, if you do this, we're done. We are finished. Instead of wrecking our marriage, let's go to marriage counseling or take a vacation. Please." "This isn't about us, Wolfgang. This is about me and my happiness. I love you more than you can imagine, but right now, I need a break from you, from us. Honey, I love you more than life itself, and that's why I can't stand by and let you do this. Our marriage is threatened, and I won't share you with anyone. I've never cheated on you, and I can't stand by and let you cheat on me. It's not about love. I know what I'm doing. Now get off those stairs. You can't stop me from going to my bedroom," Molly said, her voice cold and defiant. As she passed me, she said, "Don't raise your hands like you're about to hit me." I was stunned, blurting out, "Molly, I wouldn't." She interrupted, "Back off, Wolfgang. I'm warning you." She quickly disappeared into our upstairs bedroom. What the hell just happened? I said loudly enough for everyone upstairs to hear, "I would never lay a hand on you, and you know it." For at least 20 minutes, I sat on the stairs, trying to gather my thoughts about what I needed to do when Molly, dressed to kill, walked past me. She was wearing a little black dress that showed off her perfectly toned, slender yet curvy legs and emphasized her full figure. Her 3-inch heels were the ones she'd bought on New Year's Eve last year and only worn for that occasion. In her hand was a small overnight bag. I pleaded anxiously, "Please, Molly, I beg you, don't do this, please." Just then the doorbell rang, and she looked at me with a cold smile, only the warm, upturned corners of her mouth and her cold, emotionless eyes. Molly opened the door, and standing on the threshold was a tall man in an expensive coat and suit. He was at least 6'4" and weighed around 220 pounds, with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. I guessed he was in his late 30s or early 40s. As if I wasn't there, he leaned down and gave my wife a warm kiss. "Hello, darling," he said. "You look absolutely delectable." They both laughed. "Hey, you son of a bitch. That's my wife. Get the hell out of my house, or I'll throw you out," I yelled. Boiling with rage, I moved and grabbed my wife's arm. "Let go of me, Wolfgang." She broke free from my grasp, and the man stepped between us. "Leave her alone, Wolfgang," he warned with a smirk. "You're a brave son of a bitch, aren't you?" I spat. He turned to Molly and calmly asked, "Has he been like this long?" "Yes, Gunn, since I told him about us," Molly said seriously. "I know you only met Wolfgang at the party, but he's not usually like this." I realized this was Molly's new boss, Gunn Bradford. He was one of the partners at the law firm where she worked. As I saw the look between those two, I felt like that bird nesting in the cannon's mouth. Serious stuff was coming, and I didn't know how much or from where. Turning back to me, Gunn said, "Molly's going with me, and you can't stop her. You have no legal right to detain her or restrain her as you just attempted. Of course, you can file for divorce from her. That's your legal right. Be warned, if you choose that route, my law firm will gladly bankrupt you with attorney's fees. Right now, your lovely wife, also a dear friend and valued colleague of mine, needs a break from a joyless, boring, and stressful marriage. Honestly, so do I, so we're taking a break together." They exchanged warm smiles. Bradford continued, "So, for as long as this lasts between Molly and me, you need to calm down and remain the hardworking, kind, and loving husband Molly often brags about. And don't think that either Molly or I want to break up your marriage. It's just purely physical, animalistic attraction." Both laughed. "Don't worry, Wolfgang, this won't happen every night. And if I know Molly, she'll still take care of you." He turned to my wife, "Won't you?" Molly giggled and looked up at Gunn mischievously. "Of course, Gunn," and I tried to explain to him that it's just CX. "What I have with my husband is true love." She smiled at me, "Right, Wolfgang?" "Your delivery sucks," I angrily retorted. Gunn turned back to me with a smirk and said assuredly, "All right, Wolfgang, calm down and don't do anything stupid you'll regret. I'll have her home tomorrow afternoon or Sunday at the latest, in the condition she's in now." Well, almost. Both laughed. He helped her into the expensive suede coat I'd given her for Christmas. Hand in hand, they walked down the stairs and out the porch door. I went outside and stood there, stunned, nauseous, and trembling. Anger, jealousy, hurt, and fear welled up inside me. I heard the roar of a high-performance engine, and some kind of European sports car sped off from the blind spot behind the high fence at the corner of the yard. I called Kevin and recounted what had happened. He said, "Don't do anything, Wolfgang, I'll be there in half an hour." When my brother-in-law arrived, I was still sitting on the porch in the late January cold, wearing only jeans, boots, and a long-sleeved fleece shirt. "Come on, Wolfgang, let's go inside," Kevin said, helping me to my feet. After pouring me a stiff double bourbon, Kevin asked me to describe everything in as much detail as possible, and he recorded it all on a small digital recorder. Because of the shocking nature of everything, I was able to recount the events in detail. The most puzzling thing was Molly's overreaction whenever I became angry. I noted that Bradford reacted similarly. Kevin confirmed that I, or any other man for that matter, had no legal right to prevent my wife from leaving the marital home for a date. Moreover, although the house was my sole legal property, Molly still had the right to return until she was legally evicted. "So, what about when I grabbed her arm to try and stop her from leaving?" I asked, somewhat fearfully anticipating the answer. Kevin shook his head. "You can't do that. It could be considered domestic violence, especially with a witness like Bradford. Look, it was just a reaction, and she broke free from my grasp." Kevin nodded sympathetically. "Don't worry about that. What's done is done. Legally, she could sue you for assault or even domestic assault." "Jesus Christ. I can't believe this," I said, defeated. It felt like my heart was being ripped from my chest and I felt tears welling up again. "What can I do, Kevin?" "Legally, all you can do is divorce her. Texas still allows filing on the grounds of adultery, which usually affects the division of property and spousal support. Of course, the court could order counseling, so you should at least get her to see a mental health professional. Hell, Mom couldn't even get her to see a doctor for hormone testing." I wiped my eyes with my fleece sleeve. God, I still love her. I can't throw away this many years, and she's using that against me. "It could be depression or hormones, or a combination of both," my brother-in-law said. "I'll keep an ear to the ground for a couple of days and see if she realizes how badly she's messed things up." "I don't know," I mumbled. "You weren't there, man." It was like she was possessed. That look she gave me when she opened the door was vicious. Then her attitude, the way she kissed him in front of me. They wanted to kill each other the way they did this. Damn it, she could say I'm going to bed with my boss and sleep with him, then drive over to his house, but he shows up at my door like it's a high school date. My pulse pounded in my ears. Okay, let's look at who he is, Wolfgang. His old man is Daniel Bradford. That son of a bitch thinks he can do anything and get away with it, and he probably can, Kevin explained. They only started this law firm about a year ago, but Bradford, sir, is making waves in the underclass law firms. From what I hear, they're almost charging more than we are, and we've been established for a long time. I can't even fathom this, Wolfgang. But the woman doing this isn't my sister, man. She isn't, and you know it. Then he asked, when Bradford mentioned his marriage, was that all he said? That he was also taking a break. That's it. The more I think about it, I wonder if this is a casual fling or a full-blown affair. I wonder if he threatened his wife with financial ruin via the law firm if she made waves. That doesn't make sense. The problem with what Bradford said is both you and Mrs. Bradford could use community funds to pay attorneys. It could be mere bluster, or maybe he's willing to burn everyone's house down if he or his wife makes a fuss, Kevin wondered. We talked ourselves to death, and finally, I opted for hoping for the best, a pretty pathetic strategy, but hey, what did I know? Maybe Molly was mentally ill. Maybe she was just a horrible person. At that point, I was playing the waiting game. Looking back, I think both Kevin and I believed Molly Brown would actually show up eventually, and we could work things out. After Kevin left, I went to my home office and flopped down on the futon, foolishly thinking sleep would come easily. My mind replayed the loop of Molly, me and Brad Bradford, along with the agonizing humiliation, the images of Molly dressed as she was. In my imagination, I saw her beautiful legs wrapped around a sweating, bloody Bradford. I could practically see him pounding my beautiful wife and then looking up at me with that smirk. After a 2 a.m. Benadryl, I drifted into a fitful, difficult sleep. Waking around 9 a.m., I choked down some peanut butter and grape jelly toast with copious amounts of strong coffee. The day was cold, gray, and threatening sleet, a perfect reflection of my mood. Molly's mother called around 10, saying she'd been trying to reach her daughter since the night before. Wolfgang, we know this isn't the real Molly. I'm going to bring that girl back and she'll start being a good wife again, she said, her voice anxious and strained. I ended up comforting Betty. Kevin called and told me he'd consulted one of his associate attorneys, Bethany Robinson, a family law specialist. She advised me to start separating our finances on Monday, but I started that process online Saturday, as much as I could. I called 2 credit card companies, both had zero balances, and canceled them. I printed out all the paperwork I needed to change beneficiaries on insurance policies and investments. I took those documents to Kevin's house, where his wife, Crixie, also a paralegal at his firm, notarized them. At FedEx, I set up the paperwork to be delivered Monday morning. Then the waiting began. When your wife sleeps with her boss, the human brain tends to nurture her misery. With no factual information, the imagination runs wild, creating a painful, worse than reality. I needed to do something, so I started digging into Gunn Bradford. I confirmed he was the same as Daniel Bradford, and probably trying to follow in his old man's footsteps. Through online searches and public records, I also found that Gunn Bradford was married to Tonya Barrett Bradford. Seeing the hyphen, I pictured a Birkenstock-wearing feminist, but I knew that was unfair. She was in the same damn boat as me. What I couldn't find was her phone number. I had dinner at Kevin and Crixie's on Saturday, and no one felt comfortable with the 900-pound gorilla in the room, playing the bagpipes. Like us, their 2 kids were in college, and their oldest son was serving in the Marines, floating somewhere in the Indian Ocean. Conversation was strained and stilted, and the movie we watched was mostly a distraction from the uncomfortable silence. Sleepless, I decided to check the water heater in the basement, where I noticed some corrosion on the pipes. Closer inspection revealed the gas supply line installed during the conversion from LP to natural gas had a couple of issues. One was pipe corrosion, the other was that the line from the inline ball valve had cross-threaded and corroded, weakening it. I shut off the gas supply at the ball valve and would handle the repair next week. I also needed to find the small water leak in the basement wall or plumbing that was causing the corrosion. I made a mental note to call a plumber and have him completely redo the piping. Working on some consulting projects also occupied my mind, and before I knew it, it was almost 4 a.m. Again, I slept fitfully for about 4 hours and almost skipped breakfast again. I heard the key in the front door at 12:33 p.m. on Sunday. Molly walked in, wearing jeans, a designer turtleneck, sneakers, and a suede jacket. She had minimal makeup and her hair was pulled back. Without a word, she walked past me and went straight upstairs to our bedroom. Was I shocked? Actually, yes. Mostly Molly's brazen, almost arrogant return unsettled me. Was I surprised? No, because nothing my wife did could surprise me anymore, or so I imagined. When she came back down, I said acidly, "Okay, thanks, and how was your, darling wife?" I'd become quite adept at sitting on the sofa, staring into space, and thinking of nothing. I was doing this when a little after 1, Molly came down the stairs wearing a terrycloth robe and her hair wrapped in a towel. She sat on the opposite end of the sofa and faced me as she began brushing her long, wet hair. My wife, who'd just been with another man, was sitting there methodically brushing her wet hair, as she had done thousands of times or more while with me. Superficially, nothing was different. It was a familiar, even intimate picture, screaming normalcy. Yet, beneath the comfortable, familiar exterior, the camouflage, nothing was the same. The Molly I had married, loved, conceived with, comforted, nursed through illness, and pledged my love, life, and loyalty to was gone. As if reading my mind, Molly said in the normal tone I hadn't heard in weeks, if not months. "So, Wolfgang, here I am. The woman who left on Friday night. I feel much better than I have in months." She winced as she touched a tangle of hair, and then carefully worked it out. "Can we act like adults, or are you still wallowing in self-pity?" She just twisted the knife. I got off the sofa and started heading upstairs. Easily snapping back into bitch mode, Molly hissed, "Where the hell do you think you're going? We still need to talk, damn it." "Molly, we've never talked. You and fuckface Bradford have ordered unconditional surrender. I wasn't okay with it on Friday. I'm not okay with it now, and I won't be okay with it tomorrow." She jumped up and yelled down the stairs, "I asked you where you're going." I glared at her. "Where I'm going is none of your damn business anymore, darling wife. I'm moving my belongings to the guest room." "Oh, you're definitely on, Wolfgang Brown. You're my husband, and you won't be allowed to disrespect me in my own home." Talk about irony, Molly. You know, if you didn't have double standards, you wouldn't have any standards at all. I yelled back at her. As I was moving my belongings to the empty guest room, Molly approached me and asked in a rather polite voice, "Are you making anything for lunch?" "Why would you think I'm still catering to you after Friday night?" She looked away. "Didn't fuckface feed you today?" I growled. A sly smile crossed her face. "No, he didn't. He was too busy showing me how a real man fucks before he drove me back home to my sweet little husband," she said with a sneer. "So, nothing fixed for lunch, huh?" "No, honey. I've only been cooking for one since you left on Friday." Restraining the urge to strangle the bitch, I added, "Want something to eat? There's rat poison in the basement, drain O under the sink, and I'm sure there's still some cow dung piled up behind the garage." "Motherfucker, Wolfgang, you childish asshole," she said before storming off. "Ladies and gentlemen, love has left the building," I yelled after her. We avoided each other for the rest of the day. I left the office only to grab a quick sandwich and get some clothes from the spare bedroom. The futon finally wore me out, and I slept better Sunday night and woke early. There was plenty to keep me busy until Molly left for her office. I was even more surprised when my wife, in her cowardice, only made coffee for herself. "Oh, well," I reasoned, "if you openly cheat on your husband, you'll surely disappoint him in the coffee-making courtesy we've maintained for over 20 years. Then things got worse. Much worse. It was almost 2 p.m. on a Monday when I heard a loud, insistent banging on my front door. It was unmistakable, the knock of the police. Prather County Sheriff's Department. "Open up," confirmed my suspicions. I remembered Kevin's call from Friday night, and through the storm door's glass, I saw the sheriff's deputy's clipboard, papers flapping in the cold late January wind. I opened the door, speechless. "David Wayne Brown?" the sheriff asked. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Step outside and put your hands behind your back." "I have a warrant for your arrest for domestic assault," he declared. A second deputy cuffed me while the first explained the charges. "The complainant, Molly Elena Sandoval Brown, alleges you assaulted her at this residence last Friday, and Gunn Flanagan witnessed it." They Mirandized me, and as the second deputy locked my house, I asked, "So, if your wife's boss comes to your house, kisses your wife in front of you, then proceeds to tell you they're going away for a week, what would you do?" Both deputies looked away, clearly embarrassed. "Well, gentlemen, you better hope Gunn Flanagan never fancies your wife, because between him and his corrupt father, They'll screw you both." As they strapped me into the patrol car, the second deputy said, "Hey man, we know this whole deal stinks. We don't like it any more than you do." The first deputy added me, "I'd kill them both. Sorry, but people like that don't deserve to live. But like you said, Flanagan has connections at the courthouse, and we're just pawns like you. It's nothing personal." I was arraigned at 9 the next morning. My wife and Bradford were there. To her credit, the bitch didn't even look at me or her brother, Kevin, who represented me. When the judge asked how I pleaded to the charges, I answered firmly, "Not guilty," earning a smile from Bradford. Then the bad news hit. Before Kevin could bail me out, I was served with a temporary restraining order. A hearing to review the order was set for 10 days later, the following Friday. I was given 45 minutes on Wednesday morning to remove any belongings I needed to live elsewhere. Since I worked from home, this meant trying to move my specialized plotter printer, along with my high-end personal computer and all the necessary printers and related hardware to do my job. I also needed to move my office phone, and at that point I had nowhere to live. Betty called around to friends and family, and one managed to locate a box truck. As we began moving, a cold, blustery, freezing rain started falling. There was no way I could get the expensive equipment out of my house. We packed the PC and monitor and loaded them into the truck. But the printer and filing cabinet were stuck between the 45-minute time limit and the awful weather. We asked the deputy for more time, and he went to talk to my wife, who was sitting in her car where the long driveway met the county road. He shook his head no, forcing us to leave. Kevin got out and tried to explain the situation to Molly, and she said, "No, I want him gone. He scares me." She still couldn't look her brother in the eye. With no time to return the equipment to the home office, we had to leave the plotter, other printers, and the filing cabinet containing all my business records in the short hallway between the basement door and the office entrance. I spent the next 3 days trying to bring some order to the chaos my life had become. Kevin again had to decline my case because the complainant was his sister. Kevin referred me to one of his associates, Alimony Forsyth, a criminal lawyer in his late 20s who looked exactly like a young Paul Hogan. Our strategy was simple. I would not accept any plea bargain for the amended domestic assault charge and demand a jury trial to clear my name. I would take the stand and testify to the mitigating circumstances and my feelings at the time. Any reasonable jury would see the situation for what it was, especially once Flanagan and Molly testified and the facts surrounding my domestic assault were brought to light. The biggest complication, of course, was the restraining order, which we would have a chance to get lifted, hopefully before trial, but certainly after an acquittal. Texas juries are powerful and often nullify the law when common sense clearly dictates justice rather than blindly following the letter of the law as written or interpreted. As I suspected, Molly had recorded the whole charade, as she told me to back off and put your hands down. The whole situation was a setup, but first we needed to overturn the restraining order, and Forsyth immediately got to work for the upcoming hearing. He also appealed to the judge who issued the order, requesting the return of the remaining equipment necessary for my work. I hoped, but I certainly wasn't patient, and my anger was consuming me. Crixie insisted I move into their small apartment attached to their garage, and honestly, it was quite cozy and suitable for working and living in a small space. I got my office phone transferred to a new line there, but it took 3 days. I spent a lot of time on my cell phone pre-calling my clients. That weekend, I was still in limbo and I could work a little bit in my new, rather cozy digs. By Sunday evening, it was clear the stress, lack of food, lack of sleep, and constant tension had suppressed my immune system. As January ended, I came down with one of the worst winter colds I'd ever had. I started taking zinc and vitamin C, trying to mitigate its effects. Forsyth called me Monday night. He said the judge had assigned a deputy to take me home Tuesday morning to determine what I needed to remove to conduct my work and live away from home. I could take what I could carry, and Forsyth had arranged for a professional moving company to pick up my office equipment. All I needed to do was label those items with pre-printed labels. The first thing that worked in my favor was the assignment of Deputy Annie Brown, no relation, to accompany me. He was recovering from a serious work-related car accident, and he was still undergoing physical therapy and rehabilitation. Escorting me was a light-duty assignment for him. When Deputy Brown and I arrived at my house, Molly was there, and she made quite a production of being bothered. She informed the deputy that she was now working primarily from home, but she acquiesced to the court order. Within minutes, Molly drove away and parked at the end of the driveway next to the county road, which cleared the way for me to legally enter my own home. My deputy sheriff, clearly in pain, got my sympathy. I apologized for dragging him out in that awful February weather. Back at my place, instead of following me as he should have, he slumped into a comfy armchair while I gathered clothes and prepped my confiscated equipment for removal. To say I was shocked is an understatement. Walking in, it was obvious Molly and Flanagan had been having a family game in my house. The evidence was everywhere. 3 of Molly's panties, lacy sexy ones I'd never seen before, were strewn around, clearly kicked off her legs. They'd basically christened the kitchen counter, dining table, and sofa. She'd never casually discarded her used underwear like that in all our years together. That twisted the knife deeper. While packing, more evidence of Flanagan's stay emerged. His clothes in my closet, his toiletries in my bathroom, even his medication on my nightstand, including Viagra. Next to it, a half-empty bottle of lubricant and a purple, long dildo with a peculiar rim at the base. After grabbing clothes and essentials, I packed them in a large duffel bag and left it for the deputy. Then I checked my office equipment. It was missing. I informed the deputy, who then played 20 questions with me, as if I didn't know exactly where I'd left things. I showed him photos I'd taken the day we'd left, clearly showing the equipment's location. Then I showed him the empty space. Finally, his brain cells connected, and he exclaimed, "They couldn't have done that." Aha, I thought, Deputy Brown's got detective potential. After checking the main floor, I went to the basement. The first clue was a fresh, sizable dent in one of the wooden steps. Sure enough, at the bottom, I found my plotters completely destroyed. Someone had tossed them down the stairs, along with other printers and a printer stand. Both filing cabinets were smashed from the rough tumble, one nearly on the bottom steps, the second having slid off the first, resting against the hot water tank, the one I'd shut off last weekend. Back upstairs, I showed Deputy Brown the damage. He briefly surveyed the destruction, then retreated to the kitchen table to write his report. Returning to the basement, I examined the hot water tank and discovered a damaged, rusty pipe connection. The impact from the second filing cabinet had clearly severed the weakened connection. I saw the broken parts were still touching, and the crack wasn't obvious in the dim light, but the shut-off valve was still closed, as I'd left it. For the first time in my life, I did something with malicious intent. Call me crazy or desperate, but I saw an opportunity and took it. The sneering smiles, the belittling, the blatant disrespect, the ridiculous restraining order, the threats, the pictures of them having sex, and Molly rubbing my face in it, it pushed me over the edge. I'm not dodging responsibility, but I didn't wake up that morning planning malice. Whatever, I'm living with the consequences now, and there's no undo button. With my jacket sleeve concealing my hand, I nudged the shut-off valve open a little more than halfway, matching the impact of the second filing cabinet. Immediately, I smelled natural gas. Wasting no time, I backed away, snapping quick photos of the destroyed printers and smashed cabinets. In 2 of the photos, you can clearly see the valve partially open. You can see the damaged connection in the back of one photo, showing the pipes were still aligned. From the basement stairs, I looked toward the central heating system at the far end of the basement. I heard the furnace roar and saw the natural gas flame flickering through the viewing glass as the system fought the February chill. Natural gas leaked slowly into the basement, fate taking control as I went into the kitchen and closed the door behind me. To mask my anxiety, I feigned quietly, justified outrage over what my wife and her boyfriend had done to my valuable equipment. While he scribbled, I eyed the closed basement door, thanking myself for using all the weather stripping to seal that drafty old thing. If someone detected the gas leak, I'd claim a severe cold prevented me from smelling it. If asked why I didn't notice the half-open gas valve, I could say I was too upset and distracted by the destroyed printers and filing cabinets. Deputy Brown saw my trembling hands and said sympathetically, "It'll be all right. I'm sure the judge will cite them for contempt of court, and they've violated several laws. I'll put it all in my report, Mr. Brown. I'm on your side on this one, sir." He smiled and tapped his paperwork for emphasis. I nodded. "Yes, sir, Deputy Brown, and thank you. I appreciate it." As we drove away, Molly passed us, heading back to the house, staring straight ahead. The deputy noticed this and said, "She's pretty cold, huh?" I just nodded, staring at the familiar countryside rolling by. What the hell have I done? I thought as panic welled up. I can't undo this without admitting I knew. The drive back to town was long and silent. That afternoon, Alimony Forsyth called. "Good news. Judge Smith cited your wife and Flanagan for contempt of court and recommended the prosecutor charge them with criminal mischief and intentional damage to personal property exceeding $1,500. Recommended? I chuckled. Honestly, I had the same reaction. Smith's involvement wasn't random. He and Flanagan, sir, were law partners before Senior got his appointment to the State Resource Planning Commission and Smith ran for county judge, Alimony stated. They'll plead to something minor, literally a misdemeanor, and pay restitution. Damn politics. I sighed in frustration. I'm out 2 professional pieces of equipment, costing about $200 apiece. I want that too. I'll mention this to the court clerk tomorrow. And keep your receipts. We spent a few minutes discussing Friday's hearing regarding the temporary restraining order. Forsyth told me the chances of overturning our order were slim until after my trial for domestic assault, likely months away. Back in my apartment, I couldn't relax or even breathe well. I had a persistent hacking cough. Hacking so badly I went to the main house, where Crixie gave me a brand new bottle of Nyquil PM. I always buy a few at the start of winter, she said. Sitting on the couch in my apartment, Kevin knocked on my door. He brought a wrapped thermos. It was a potent hot toddy courtesy of Crixie, which I gratefully drank. Kevin and I chatted for a while, and I must have dozed off. I woke to urinate, and the digital clock read 12:37. Gas leak, Molly, fuckface, nothing registered in my mind as the drug-induced sleep clung to me. A huge bang jolted me awake, and despite the lingering effects of the nightcap and cold medicine, I stumbled to my feet. Kevin was at the door, and his face told me everything I needed to know. Something terrible had happened at my house. Panic threatened to buckle my legs, and I stood trembling. "What?" I yelled, a mix of anger and fear. Both were true. I knew I'd be held accountable for whatever happened, and I hoped I hadn't left a clue, made a mistake, leaving a trail. Guilt and regret could come later. He stammered. Then I saw Crixie's tear-streaked face over his shoulder. "There's been an explosion at your house," he croaked, the emotion choking his voice. It's bad, man. Really bad." Crixie hugged him from behind. Still in yesterday's jeans, I threw a warm jacket over my t-shirt. Shaking from fear and fever, it took me a minute to get my socks and shoes on. Crixie helped me with my coat, and we rushed to Kevin's car. My mind replayed everything I knew, everything I'd done. As we drove, I asked the obvious questions, and the answer was always, we don't know. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I feared. The $64,000 question was, what did I expect would happen when I acted? I was surprised I hadn't even considered the outcome. Was I angry? Was I fighting back against an illegal, politically motivated, corrupt situation targeting me? Did I even care at this point? Crixie mistook my anxious, grim silence for concern for Molly. I was staring out the back passenger window of Kevin's Beam when she turned and looked at me with sympathy. Crixie took my hand like the sweet sister-in-law and good friend she was. "We're here for you, Wolfgang. That's what families do." We turned off the main highway onto County Road 14, and in the pre-dawn light, I could see smoke rising above the distant trees. Tears welled as we got closer. A sheriff stopped us about a quarter mile from the house, but we were waved through when I identified myself. I was shocked by the sheer devastation. The roof, mostly intact, smoldered over the garage, and shattered walls were blown outward. The interior floors and walls were a chaotic jumble of boards and debris filling the gaping hole where the basement had been. Clothes, papers, photos, furniture, bricks from the exterior first floor, and lumber were everywhere. I picked up a blown-away piece of paper, a cell phone bill from last October. Crixie recovered a photo of Bill at summer camp when she was about 10. While there had been a flash fire along with the blast, surprisingly little was actually burned. The nearby volunteer fire department was on the scene within minutes and had shut off utilities and extinguished the small, newly ignited fires breaking out on the scene. They even found my safe. We'd hidden it inside a wall within the master bedroom closet behind a shoe rack. They found it in the middle of the driveway near the garage. My life, my wife, everything I owned was shattered before my eyes. Unbelievably, family memories were swirling around me in the crisp breeze. Without warning, my knees buckled, and they helped me into the back of the ambulance where they administered oxygen and checked my vitals. The EMTs warned me that with my fever, low blood oxygen, and wheezing lungs, I probably had pneumonia. It took about 15 minutes before I recovered enough to return to the horrific task at hand. Crixie and Kevin put their arms around me as we silently watched the firefighters find and cover 2 bodies with yellow plastic sheeting. A weak, cold winter sun peeked over the horizon, bathing the scene in a ghastly golden light. What had I felt? Grief? Guilt? Anger? Fear? Loss? All of the above? It's impossible to say because those emotions manifested in such similar ways that I couldn't rationally sort them out. Perhaps this violent event had numbed and broken the part of me that could sort and deal with emotions. Maybe some reptilian survival instinct took over to save what was left of me. I became nauseous and lightheaded, and I welcomed the black oblivion that buckled my knees and pulled me away from that horrific scene. The next thing I remember was lying in a hospital bed, breathing the cool, pleasant dampness through an oxygen mask, my vitals displayed on a monitor pulsed steadily to the rhythm of my heart. Bill was in a chair, upset, crying, and I wondered why she wasn't at school. Then it hit me. Her mother was gone, and her father. What was I doing here? I must have gasped because Bill immediately ran to me, hugged me tight, and cried, "Oh, Dad, please be okay. You're all we have, Dad." Then I remembered my house, blown to bits, the debris scattered across the gently sloping hill we jokingly called Brown Mountain. I wept for the loss of my marriage and the woman I loved with all my heart. I wept for the loss of my humanity and for the place and things we once called home and everything that had ever meant anything from there. Was I a murderer? Was it self-defense? Molly and Gunn didn't care about his wife or me. But was this literally an overreaction? Too many powerful, conflicting emotions flooded me. As Bill and I talked about the explosion and events of the past weeks and months, she told me that Thane was making arrangements for his mother's funeral. I felt a pang of discomfort that my 20-year-old son was shouldering this terrible task. Because of this, I felt more guilty and sad than I felt guilty and sad because my actions had created this chaos. As if reading my mind, Bill added, "Grandma and Kevin are helping him. Aunt Crixie, Aunt Tina, and Uncle Art have sent people to the house to salvage what they can, especially photos and papers. There wasn't much fire, so most things are just scattered and buried. They aren't letting anyone into the house wreckage yet because the fire marshal, the sheriff's department, and several others are looking for a cause." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I noticed they were just like Molly's and continued, "There must be 50 people out there helping, even in this cold weather. Lots of people loved Mom." Bill omitted her mother from that statement, although we both knew Molly was loved by many, perhaps more than I was. "Honey," I said, "your mother was loved more than most. She was like a grandma in that way." Bill nodded, trying to suppress more tears than the dam broke. "Oh, Dad, why did she? What happened to Mom?" The pain racking my daughter was absolute. I cried with her, for my daughter, for my wife, and for my own tormented soul. Why had I done what I had done? How could I ever forgive myself, or live with this? Yeah, I was there. I had 2 choices, plain and simple, confess or live with it. We're talking manslaughter, maybe even murder. With Bradford Sr. pulling strings, I had no idea what kind of punishment I'd face if I confessed. That's what sealed the deal. Look, I could have easily denied everything and claimed I was justified. But here's how I see it. I didn't start this. My wife was messed up, hormonal, maybe mental health issues, and Bradford took advantage of that. It was wrong on so many levels, him being married and dating a married woman. One level is the sheer immorality of it all. The other, Bradford was a court official, using his legal position and political connections to squash any opposition from my wife or me. He and his old man had no qualms about twisting justice with their money, power, and influence, controlling, manipulating, and destroying. I figured I was just using the only means I had to level the playing field. He took my wife, so I took his namesake, Gunn Bradford Sr. Self-defense justice? Guerrilla warfare. I guess that's what it was. And like guerrillas everywhere, it was the only fight I could wage, the only one I could afford. Now I'm paying the price, and I will be for the rest of my life. Looking back, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a weight lift off my shoulders. Was I delusional? Maybe still am. But the crushing guilt is still there, and I work every day to atone for it. I've just spent 4 extra days in the hospital battling a nasty case of double pneumonia and a serious sinus infection. But that's nothing compared to the whirlwind that's been my life lately. My lawyer, Alimony Forsyth, delivered some good news. The domestic assault charges against me have been dropped. The complainant and 2 key witnesses are, unfortunately, deceased. The restraining order's also been lifted. However, that doesn't mean the legal battle is over. I'm facing a Justice of the Peace (JP) inquest, which is required in smaller Texas counties, like mine, which doesn't have a medical examiner, when there's a suspicious violent or undetermined death. This is a complicated case, so gathering all the facts and witnesses is taking time. My inquest is over 2 weeks after I leave the hospital. 6 ordinary citizens will act as a jury, reviewing the evidence and testimonies while the JP presides. The county attorney will help with the questioning. This inquest is an investigative hearing, and my lawyer won't be there. He explained that the presence of a jury isn't something my ex-father-in-law, Bradford, wants. He knows that if the JP proceeds, my ex-father-in-law's political influence and money could easily land me in Huntsville's state prison. Rumors about what my ex-wife, Molly, and her boyfriend, Junior, were up to in my marital bed have leaked. Local politicians are eager to pass the hot potato to 6 average Texans whose common sense and judgment will decide my fate. Even the shadiest politician knows you can't pick up a political hot potato with clean hands. Facing this jury is the first bit of balance I've had since the day I had the talk with my ex-wife. The irony? I've been accused of a crime my ex-father-in-law wants to pin on me, regardless of whether I actually did it. His logic: I was in the basement that day, therefore I must be guilty. Even the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, from Dallas investigated, testing the soil for explosive residue. They found nothing. Deputy Brown's report includes photos of the damage to my equipment, so it's no surprise my photos in his report, along with our testimonies, were subpoenaed for the inquest. On the first day, they questioned me from 10:42 a.m. to 12:28 p.m. I stuck to my story. The rules of evidence here are much less formal than a criminal trial. Only someone charged with a crime related to the investigated deaths is allowed legal counsel. It's more of an informal overview of what happened. My lawyer called it officially informal. The JP, with the county attorney, questioned me rigorously, as they did all the witnesses. I explained that I didn't smell any natural gas because I was horribly sick. That terrible cold turned into pneumonia and sinusitis, landing me in the hospital the day of the explosion, my persistent, severe cough after the virus, and my continued frail appearance 2 weeks later, likely added to my credibility. I also stated that I didn't notice a partially open gas valve because I was distraught and focused on the damaged tools that supported my livelihood. Plus, there was only one light at the top of the basement stairs. It was always pretty dark down there. 4 out of 12 of my photos, all taken with flash, clearly show the valve's position and the damage to the filing cabinets. One photo shows black paint from the second filing cabinet, which was thrown down the basement stairs, that splattered onto the water heater. That same picture shows what the fire investigators identified as a damaged leaking connection, which was actually intact, possibly easily overlooked. The county attorney brought up the restraining order, which I addressed as honestly as I could. I admitted to grabbing my wife's arm after she kissed Gunn Finnegan in our home. The county attorney let me describe my emotions and desperation. The stress, exhaustion, poor health, and guilt pushed me to the brink as I explained how I felt seeing my wife walk out the door with another man. I broke down, honestly and sincerely. That seemed to temper the questioning a bit. I never mentioned the bizarre things Molly said that night during the talk, which she'd recorded. At my pre-inquest meeting with Forsyth, we discussed the recording's questionable nature. He pointed out the restraining order support made no mention of it. Judge Smith might have heard it but couldn't officially acknowledge it. Therefore, it was best not to mention it. Officially, it didn't exist and I didn't want to give it life. When asked about the photos I took of Gunn's belongings in my house, which were shown to me during my testimony, I admitted I'd taken them as evidence for my planned divorce, where I intended to cite adultery. Then I innocently asked about the missing photos of the Viagra, butt lube, and dildo on the nightstand. The suddenly flustered JP took the county attorney into his office for a discussion. The solution: I had to retrieve those photos from the cloud, and the jury passed my phone around. Clearly, the JP and jury knew what the DA had done. The most intense questions concerned my work on the basement water heater. I described what I found that Saturday, matching the fire investigators' findings from the explosion's debris. I also told the inquest that I turned off the supply valve. "Did you attempt to repair the damage, Mr. Brown?" the DA asked. "No, I did not, as I lacked the parts or expertise. So I secured the water heater by turning off the gas supply. I planned to call a plumber the following week, I truthfully answered. Didn't you consider taping or tying the valve shut to prevent this? No, sir. I was the only one who ever went into the basement, and the valve wasn't at risk of accidental activation. I've secured gas or propane lines before and never had this problem, I replied. In hindsight, do you think securing it would have been better? That classic question I understood. No, sir. Absolutely not. I mean, the last thing I could imagine is someone throwing my 2 heavy filing cabinets down the basement stairs, the second one landing on the first and bouncing 3 feet into the supply line, sir. 2 jurors smiled. Undeterred, the DA continued. And you didn't think to call a plumber to fix this dangerous situation? I tried to stay calm. No, sir. I was in jail Monday night and had no home from Tuesday onwards. When asked to leave the home, didn't you think Mrs. Brown should know about this? I looked at the justice of the peace, JP, and said, You have a temporary restraining order in place, Judge. As I understand it, contacting my wife in any way would violate that order. Am I correct, sir? After briefly reviewing the TRO, the JP replied, Yes, Mr. Brown. Contacting your wife or Mr. Bradford even via text or email would violate that order. I turned to the county attorney. Honestly, sir, I forgot about that because my life's been turned upside down since my arrest. But that valve wasn't at risk of accidental activation, sir, except under extreme circumstances. Plus, if I'd thought about it and contacted Molly in her agitated state, she would have had me arrested for violating the order. That pretty much sums up much of the long hearing. It wasn't a trial, but it sure felt like one. Later, I learned Kevin had testified about my condition the night Molly and Gunn were together, and my actions leading up to the explosion. Crixie also testified. They even called Betty Sandoval to discuss her efforts to get Molly to drop the temporary restraining order, or to avoid making it permanent. The deputy who'd brought me home the last time, Annie Brown, described the severe pain he was in, and how he couldn't navigate the basement stairs or the upstairs with me. He testified he never got closer to the basement door than the kitchen counter, about 8 feet away, and didn't smell any natural gas. When Tonya Barrett Bradford testified, she didn't pull any punches. Despite the DA's attempts to keep her testimony relevant, she described her husband's threats if she pursued a divorce, which mirrored my testimony exactly. Mrs. Barrett Bradford confirmed her husband left their shared home for the adulterous couple's weekend getaway. Furthermore, Gunn's widow confirmed he'd left their home while the restraining order confined me to my own residence. She stated her husband freely admitted he was moving in with Molly to continue their affair. Although redacted from the official inquest record, Mrs. Barrett Bradford let slip the unforgettable line, I hope that son of a bitch was deep inside his whore when their love nest blew up. A renowned ENT specialist from Fort Worth testified about loss of smell during severe colds and sinusitis. He stated that, in fact, different people react in different ways. His testimony basically stated there was no way to prove I could or couldn't smell a gas leak. There were many unanswered questions and unidentifiable events in this inquest. The main reason: 2 of the key witnesses were dead. Plus, the explosion completely destroyed the scene of the deaths, along with most of the specific physical evidence of what happened. Based on the best available evidence, here's what the jury in the JP inquest determined. The explosion occurred at 5:37 a.m. on February 3rd in a rural area of Prather County, Texas. The cause was a natural gas-air mixture in the basement igniting, with the ignition source possibly being the natural gas-powered central heating unit located in the same space. The source of the natural gas was a damaged supply line due to a partially open inline ball valve, which the homeowner had previously shut off. The actual events or actions that caused the leak are unidentifiable, because the explosion and subsequent flash fire caused near total destruction of the structure and its contents. Understanding when the leak started depends on knowing when a filing cabinet or other object forced that valve partially open. No one knows exactly when my possessions were thrown down the basement stairs, because the 2 people who knew are dead. Gunn's cell phone shows him leaving our house at 9:37 a.m. that day to give testimony at 11:10 a.m. at the courthouse, with Deputy Brown and myself arriving at 10:05 a.m. So, if the filing cabinets went down the basement stairs sometime that morning, causing the leak in the partially open valve, The smell of natural gas might have been overlooked, especially with my impaired sense of smell. Or those items might have been in the basement for days with a damaged connection causing no problems. This means the valve was turned later, by an unknown person or persons, or by some accidental means. Simply put, there's no evidence to support either conclusion. Due to its speculative nature, the final inquest report doesn't include that information. The final inquest report concluded, according to the fire investigator's report, the ignition source of the fuel-air mixture in the basement was the central heating unit located approximately 26 feet from the water heater. Upon inspection of the damaged water heater supply line, both installation error and corrosion due to an unknown water leak were discovered. Black paint from filing cabinet 2, filing cabinet 1 was gray, appeared on both the body of the water heater and the lower L portion of the supply line. The impact of the filing cabinet likely caused the weak connection to separate and most likely partially opened the ball valve. The inquest panel accepted the police investigation's findings on the deaths of Gunn Bradford, WM 36, and Molly Elena Sandoval Brown, F 44. Autopsy results determined they died from a combination of blunt and sharp penetrating trauma, along with exploded lungs and excessive force impacting their body surfaces. The force of the explosion propelled them both from the residence, and they landed in the debris field. He was 63 northwest of the northwest corner of the house, and she was 84 northeast of that same corner. Both were wearing remnants of clothing consistent with sleepwear, except the deceased female, who still wore what the panel confirmed was an adjustable pelvic harness, the type allowing the attachment of certain specialized sexual and or marital assistive devices. Based on that last sentence, Tonya Barrett Bradford's final statement, long since redacted from the official testimony, proved prophetic, though slightly inaccurate in detail. And no, the medical examiner's autopsy report did not confirm the finding of missing specialized sexual and or marital assistive devices inside Gunn Bradford Jr. deceased, as well as his well-connected parents, would preclude such an unfounded mention. The official concluding statement was, the panel finds this explosion to be an accident, the exact cause undetermined due to lack of conclusive evidence. The remains of the deceased are released for disposition. That's it. In short, no one knows exactly what happened to cause the gas leak or valve to open, because there's no evidence. Even circumstantial evidence is contradictory. So, without my confession, the case was closed. Gunn Bradford, sir, went ballistic over the jury's findings. The old man immediately offered a $150,000 reward for finding the culprit of this crime, even though the official investigation found no evidence of a crime. He stated he knew I did it, but even he understands knowing something and proving it are two entirely different things. To the average betrayed husband or wife, what I did probably seems like a no-brainer, a golden opportunity to exact revenge on the betrayers. Those people would call me weak or stupid for feeling guilt and remorse for my actions. To them, I'd say they've never walked in my shoes. While feeling betrayed, abused, threatened, and lied to, you can take comfort knowing you are undoubtedly a good person. You are the victim, the moral one. However, when you cross that inviolate line and take a life or lives, you've joined their side and there's no turning back. It's true that when you begin the revenge journey, dig 2 or 3 graves, in my case more. Sadly, that truth only emerges in hindsight. Making remote judgments about others' situations is clear and absolute in hindsight. However, as a rapper once succinctly put it, everybody wants to be a gangster until they got a gangster. Even a low double-digit IQ moron understands that because when you decide to start something that can't be stopped, things change forever. It's like choosing to become the villain, which brings us full circle. The guilt has somewhat faded because the human mind has ways of protecting itself. I still regret my actions, and I constantly try to make amends. By trying, I've become a better, more caring, giving, and lovable person in every aspect of my life. I now have grandchildren to spoil, a new and loving relationship to nurture, and am closer than ever to my deceased wife's family. I'm also closer to my parents and relatives on the other side of my family. When we remember Molly, it's the caring mother and loving woman I loved and lived with during those wonderful years. In death, she is tenderly restored in our hearts and minds, and I have truly forgiven her. My sincere forgiveness also extends to Gunn Bradford, the senior and junior. The only one I still struggle to forgive is David Wayne Brown. He remains a work in progress, That struggle keeps me humble, repentant, and striving to do my best each day. If anyone asks, yes, February sucked.